It was a bright Saturday morning, and Michael had just finished tending his garden when a sharp knock echoed through the house. He didn't recognize the number of cars outside, nor did he expect any visitors. His heart skipped a beat as he walked toward the door. Peering through the peephole, he froze. Two women in pristine HOA uniforms, clipboards in hand, were standing there with expressions that blended authority and something far more sinister: judgment. "Good morning," one of them began, her voice polite yet carrying a cold edge. "We need to talk about the fence you installed. It's not within HOA regulations." Michael felt a tight knot in his chest. He had followed every rule to the letter, yet here they were, appearing as though they owned the street itself. He opened the door cautiously, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not sure what the problem is," he said, but before he could continue, a deep voice interrupted from behind him. "Can I help you?" Michael turned sharply. Standing in the living room doorway was a large, imposing man in a tailored suit. His posture was perfect, his eyes scanning the visitors like a hawk. Michael's son, Ethan, had recently hired a bodyguard after some unsettling incidents at school. And now, it seemed, the timing couldn't have been more dramatic. The HOA women's smiles faltered for a fraction of a second. This was not what they had expected. The bodyguard, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped slightly forward, his presence radiating authority. The HOA leader, trying to regain control, cleared her throat and began her rehearsed spiel about rules, violations, and fines. But every word seemed to falter under the weight of the man in front of her. Michael watched quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. He hadn't wanted confrontation, but he also wasn't going to back down. This was his home, his sanctuary, and no one had the right to make him feel small within it. "Do you understand that intimidation tactics don't work here?" the bodyguard said, his voice calm but sharp, each word deliberate. The HOA woman blinked, taken aback. This wasn't a simple disagreement over fences or colors anymore. This was a silent warning. They had underestimated him. Michael's mind raced back to the emails he had received earlier that week. Threats about fines, mentions of legal action, and barely concealed threats of harassment. They had wanted to rattle him, push him into submission. But now, standing behind him, was a shield he hadn't dared imagine they would face. For a moment, the silence in the room was deafening. The birds outside seemed to pause mid-song. Then, slowly, the HOA woman straightened her back, forcing a polite, neutral smile. "Well, we'll just need to discuss this another time," she said, clearly shaken. Her companion nodded, jotting something on the clipboard with a hand that trembled ever so slightly. Michael exhaled quietly, realizing how close he had come to a conflict he wasn't ready to handle alone. After the women left, Michael closed the door and leaned against it. His hands shook slightly, though he tried to hide it from Ethan, who had been quietly observing from the corner. "That could have gone worse," Michael murmured, a dry laugh escaping him. Ethan, normally calm and collected, approached his father. "Don't worry, Dad," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder. "I told you I'd take care of things if anyone tried to cross the line. You don't have to face them alone." Michael nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had always prided himself on handling problems on his own, but this morning reminded him that sometimes strength came in the form of trusting others. He thought about the years of quiet harassment from the HOA, the emails, the random inspections, the veiled threats. It had been wearing him down without him even realizing it. "Let's make sure this doesn't happen again," Ethan said. "We need a plan." Michael agreed. They spent the next hour reviewing every communication from the HOA, noting discrepancies, illegal threats, and moments when the law had clearly been on their side. The plan wasn't about retaliation. It was about protecting their home and standing firm in a system that often favored intimidation over fairness. For the first time in months, Michael felt a flicker of hope. The fear that had been gnawing at him was slowly giving way to confidence. With Ethan's support, they weren't just defending their property, they were reclaiming peace of mind. The following week, Michael received another email, this time far more aggressive. The HOA demanded immediate compliance and hinted at escalating penalties. Michael's stomach twisted as he read the words, but he didn't panic. He forwarded the message to Ethan, who was already preparing a measured, legal response. The next day, the HOA representatives returned. Michael watched from behind the window as they approached, their expressions sharper, more purposeful. But Ethan and his bodyguard were ready. The moment the women rang the bell, the door opened, and their confident posture immediately set the tone. "You again," one of the women said, forcing a tight smile. "We expected a conversation." Ethan's calm, steady gaze interrupted her. "We'll have a conversation when it's productive. Until then, please leave." The woman hesitated, glancing at her colleague. They had come armed with rules, threats, and intimidation. But now, all they faced was quiet, unwavering authority. They shuffled backward, mumbling something about contacting the board. But the intimidation that had once seemed natural to them had evaporated. Michael realized that this was bigger than fences or rules. It was a battle for dignity and respect. The HOA had underestimated them, and in doing so had exposed their own insecurities. Later, Michael and Ethan sat together, reflecting on the encounter. "It's not about proving power," Michael said. "It's about standing your ground without losing yourself." Ethan nodded. "And sometimes, it's about having the right support in your corner." Days turned into weeks, and Michael noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Where once the HOA had wielded fear as their weapon, their influence seemed less absolute. People whispered about their bold confrontation, unsure whether to support or challenge them. Michael spent evenings in the garden, sometimes with Ethan, discussing life, fairness, and the meaning of courage. The HOA still sent letters and minor notices, but their tone had shifted. It was no longer commanding, now it was cautious, almost hesitant. One evening, Michael's neighbor, Mrs. Harper, approached him while he trimmed the roses. "I saw what happened with the HOA," she said softly. "Most of us never thought anyone could stand up to them. You and your son, you changed something here." Michael felt a strange mix of pride and humility. He hadn't sought recognition, only peace. But the truth was undeniable. Fear had a new challenger in their quiet suburban street. That night, as he sat in the living room, Michael reflected on the journey. He thought about the importance of boundaries, of trusting loved ones, and the quiet power of standing firm in one's convictions. He realized that the fight wasn't over. The HOA might continue their attempts, but now he and Ethan were ready. Months passed, and Michael noticed that the once aggressive HOA had grown cautious, sometimes hesitant to enforce even minor rules. Their intimidation tactics had lost their edge. Michael and Ethan began documenting every interaction meticulously, creating a strong record for any future disputes. One afternoon, a new neighbor approached Michael. "I've lived here for years," she said. "No one has ever faced the HOA like you two. You've inspired us." Michael smiled faintly. "It's not about inspiration. It's about fairness and respect. That's all anyone deserves in their own home." Then, one unexpected morning, the HOA contacted Michael with a surprising proposal: a mediated meeting to resolve outstanding disputes. They spoke carefully, almost reverently, aware of the quiet authority Michael and Ethan now represented. During the meeting, Michael maintained his composure, listening, responding thoughtfully, and ensuring the conversation stayed respectful. For the first time, the HOA realized that negotiation and understanding could work better than intimidation. By the end of the session, an agreement was reached that respected Michael's rights as a homeowner and set new standards for the neighborhood. As Michael closed the door after the last HOA meeting, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The shadow of fear that had loomed over his home for years had finally lifted. Ethan, standing beside him, grinned. "We did it," he said simply. Michael looked around the house, the garden, the living room, the familiar spaces that had once felt threatened. "Yes," he said, "we did it together." He realized that the ordeal wasn't just about rules or regulations. It was about trust, courage, and the unspoken bond between a father and son. The bodyguard hadn't been just protection. He had been a symbol of standing firm. From that day forward, the neighborhood felt different. Michael's home was no longer a target of fear, and for the first time in years, he could enjoy the simple joys of life. Laughter with his son, quiet mornings in the garden, and the knowledge that home truly meant safety and dignity. The HOA had come to intimidate, but they left realizing that some walls, both literal and metaphorical, were stronger than any rule.